Hello, so I constantly get asked questions regarding camera and equipment, and I thought, let's make a video to clear things up. So the other day, I got an email from a viewer just asking about equipment and how I make cinematic videos, and it's not the first email and it's probably not going to be the last, but I thought, let's address this. So currently I'm using a Sony 6500, which yes, it's a little bit pricey, but when I started YouTube, I didn't start with an expensive camera. I started with the Canon 1100D, which is about a couple £100, so not that expensive, and I got it for Christmas back in 2013. My first video was called Christmas. It was a cinematic video about Christmas, the first video I ever made. It was made on Christmas Day when I got the camera, and it wasn't the best video I've ever made, but it was my starting point. And that's the camera I started with. I made about 4 cinematic films with that, and then I was like, I need to get a better camera, and I watched a lot of Ben Brown's vlogs at the time, and at the time he was using a Canon Powershot S120. That was like the vlog camera that everyone was using. It's like the G7X of today. Everyone was using the S120 back then. And that camera shot at 60 frames per second, which is a completely new thing for me, and I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. Which made my cinematic films even better because I could slow it down. That camera again was about £300, which is a little pricey for me at the time, but it was 100% worth it because it allowed me to create these films I loved. And I used that camera for about 2 years, up until the December of 2015. I can't recommend a first cinematic camera like the Powershot S120. That was such a good camera, and if any of you want to start cinematic movies, cinematic films, my kind of style, I highly recommend using that camera because it was a perfect starting point. And then, when I went to New York, I bought the Sony RX100 Mark IV. That was my most expensive bit of equipment I've ever bought, but it was 100% worth it. My favourite video I've ever made is my New York video, and that was shot directly on the RX100 Mark IV. At the time I was shooting at 60 frames per second, which I was like, oh my god, this looked amazing. But then someone commented in my comment section and was like, why are you shooting at 60? Why not 120? And I was like, it shoots in 120. So then I started shooting at 120 frames per second, and I was like, this is twice as slow, twice as smooth, and it was amazing. That camera, yes, was really expensive, and I would recommend it if you're gonna use it well. And I used that for the whole of 2016, and it was the best camera I've ever owned until I got this camera. And then this brings me to 2017, where I bought this camera in January, and it's honestly the best camera I ever owned. It's like the RX100 Mark IV, and then a DSLR, and it's just the perfect combination of both. Okay, so that was a timeline of all my cameras. So equipment, it doesn't matter, but then again, it kind of does. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, but it does matter, to an extent though. So last year, I made a video called The Camera, which showed that you don't necessarily need an expensive camera to make a good video. And I just completely shot it on my iPhone. At the time, it was with my iPhone 6 Plus, so it wasn't necessarily the newest iPhone out, but it still made a relatively good video. And this is where the idea of to an extent comes in. Because an iPhone is about £600, £700, so it's quite pricey, but it has a great camera which allows you to make great videos. Like my friend Adam every Tuesday is doing vlogs on his main channel, and they're just shot on his iPhone, and they're really good quality. When I watched his first vlog, I didn't realise it was his iPhone until he looked in the mirror and it showed his iPhone. You can't necessarily see a difference completely between cameras and iPhones. Obviously you can, but using your iPhone for your videos isn't that bad. It's not a big deal because your iPhone is always there, so why not use it to your ability? But as I said previously, you can still get great cameras for under £300. I know, £300 is a lot of money and it's a big number, but you can get good cameras from under that. Like my S120 was about £250 to £300. I don't know if it's still available, but if it is, it's gonna be way cheaper now. My recommendation is look for a camera that shoots at 1080p at 50 or 60 frames per second, because that would be perfect for creating good quality videos. And if you wanna spend a little bit more money, go for the Sony RX100 range, because those point and shoot cameras are actually incredible, so I highly recommend them. But if you're starting out as a vlogger, you wanna sit down, make videos like this, a Canon 1200D, 700D, they're perfect for those kind of videos, for definitely starting out. And if you need to invest in a microphone as well, because the sound quality needs to be a-okay, especially if you're making sit-down vlogs. To summarize, you don't necessarily need an expensive camera to make good content. If you have an iPhone 6 onwards, you can make an amazing video with just that camera. Learning how to use the camera is so important, and that's why it's not necessarily all about the equipment, it's how you use it. If you're making a cinematic video and you know it's gonna be at a high frame rate and you're gonna be able to slow it down in post, then what you do is you think about that whilst you're filming. You do long, big strides with the camera, because then you know in post you can slow it down, smooth it down, and chop out the bits you want to use. I shoot a lot of clips that you don't see because I cut it out because I choose the best stuff. And that's right, it's how you film it. You want to film as much as possible so you can filter out the bad shots with the good shots. And a bad shot can be a good shot. It might be a little bit shaky, but you slow it down, add a little bit of stabilization in your editing settings. Final Cut Pro, Premiere Pro have some really good stabilization settings once you've sorted them out and fiddled with them. Then a shot can look really smooth. An example is the intro to my neon video. That was very shaky and very wobbly, but in the editing process I slowed it down, added a little bit of stabilization, and it looks really smooth. Before it was quite shaky because I was just walking into the building holding the camera up, and I just didn't really think it would be a good shot. But it ended up being a good shot because I could slow it down and smooth it out in the editing process. So for my cinematic videos, I shoot at 100 frames per second, and then I slow it down by 25% in the editing, which makes it look really, really smooth. And then I add some stabilization onto the clips to make the smoothness even smoother. So it kind of gives the illusion that I'm using a gimbal or a stabilizer because it's just so smooth, but I'm really not. However, I did just buy a gimbal, so in the future videos, there probably will be gimbal use, but for now, I'm just using my steady hand, I guess. Next up is color grading. Color grading is really important in making your videos stand out. So the camera video, as I said, was shot directly on my iPhone, but it didn't look like it because I color graded it in a way which made it look highly saturated and added some filters on it, so you thought it might have been shot on a DSLR or a point and shoot. And that's why it's very important to color grade, because you can completely change the style, the vibe, the feeling of a video by the way you grade it. Last year I used Final Cut Pro to edit all my videos, and I used a plugin called Magic Bullet Looks, and that allowed me to grade my videos really, really well. But now I use Premiere Pro, and that has an inbuilt color grading system where you don't have to download or buy anything. You just drag and drop a filter on, edit it, save the preset so you could use it further on. I highly recommend using Premiere Pro. It's quite complicated at the start because you're like, whoa, what is this? But a few YouTube tutorials later and you would have got the complete basics of it and you understand it really well. And if you want to make it the full cinematic vibe, which isn't necessary, but I feel like it makes it more cinematic, is add those black bars in, because those black bars make everything look so much more cinematic. I know it's frustrating, and I know the feeling when you want the brand new G7X because you can make amazing videos of that, but you just can't afford it. You need to use what you currently have to then slowly build up and get the better equipment and build up your skills. Getting a new camera won't necessarily improve your skills, it's how you use your current equipment, and then that will reflect on the new equipment. It's not necessarily new equipment will allow me to make better content and I will become a better cinematographer, a better vlogger. That's not true whatsoever. It's how you use the stuff you're using now. Like, use your iPhone, use your dad's camera, use whatever you have, because you'll be able to use that and make some amazing stuff. So I know this video has been kind of biased towards more artsy and cinematic creators here on YouTube, but it also works for the people that do vlogs and vloggers and sit-down videos. It doesn't necessarily matter about your frame rate, but the editing and the color grading also works for vlogs because it makes them pop and look a lot better. To be honest, I don't know if any of this advice is helpful to anyone, but don't let anything dishearten you. You can make great content with little to no equipment. But please don't let equipment or numbers or anything dishearten you, because you gotta continue enjoying and creating content, and that's what I do. To be honest, when I was starting, I was very hooked on getting the best equipment possible and getting it quickly. But in reality, that's not possible, especially when I was just working at a pub. So I was on like minimum wage, wasn't getting much money. So sometimes you're just gonna work really hard to get even a £300 camera, because you will then feel so much more accomplished because you did it yourself. You didn't rely on anyone, you worked your butt off, and that's how you got here. And that's how I got here. I just worked my ass off, worked constantly, and eventually I've been able to get the equipment I want to get. And that's a great feeling. So I highly recommend working hard, sticking to it, and you'll get there, you'll get there. This video was like, it hurt my brain because it's like 10 AM. and my brain is not functioning right now. But I thought I needed to bring up this subject and just talk about it because I've had a number of people contact me, tweet me, email me, that kind of stuff, asking questions. And to be honest, I don't blame them because I was doing that constantly when I first started out. So if I could help at least one person, that would be great. So I'm gonna end this video pretty quickly, but I hope you enjoyed. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments down below because I'll be sure to reply to all of them. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed and I'll see you in a bit. Bye.
To the sky on a religious high.